A quiet truth follows many empaths through life, weaving itself silently into the fabric of their daily existence, and most people never notice it. The people who care the most often suffer the most. The people who understand others deeply are often the ones struggling to understand why life keeps testing them, why the heaviest emotional burdens always seem to land on their shoulders, and why peace feels so elusive despite their constant efforts to create it for everyone else. While others seem to move through life with clear direction, unbothered by the emotional turbulence that surrounds them, many empaths spend years feeling lost, overwhelmed, and emotionally exhausted. They carry burdens that do not belong to them, absorbing the stress of their partners, the anxiety of their friends, the disappointments of their family members, and the unspoken fears of everyone in their orbit. They absorb pain they never created, taking on guilt that was never theirs to feel, apologizing for things they never did wrong, and shrinking themselves to make others feel more comfortable. They give chances when they should walk away. They offer forgiveness when it has not been earned, and they stay in situations long after their own spirit has begun to wither. And for a long time, it can feel as though life is punishing them for being kind, as though their compassion is a magnet for hardship, and as though the universe has singled them out for a level of suffering that nobody else seems to endure. Yet hidden beneath this relentless struggle is a reality that few people talk about, a truth that remains buried under years of exhaustion and confusion. The hardships empaths face are often connected to the very purpose they are meant to discover. The heartbreaks, the betrayals, the disappointments, and the moments that nearly break them are not always random events. In many cases, they become the lessons that shape who they are meant to become, the chisels that carve away everything that is not truly them, and the fires that refine their character into something unbreakable. Most people believe purpose arrives as a clear calling, a sudden flash of insight that illuminates the path forward with undeniable certainty. They expect clarity, confidence, and certainty. They imagine a moment when the fog lifts and they finally know exactly what they are meant to do with their lives. But for many empaths, purpose arrives through a very different path. It comes through challenges that feel insurmountable. It comes through loss that feels unbearable. It comes through painful experiences that force them to grow in ways they never expected and could never have planned for. Before they discover their strength, they often experience weakness so profound that they question whether they have any strength at all. Before they discover their worth, they often endure rejection after rejection, being discarded by people they loved deeply, being dismissed by those they trusted, being overlooked by those they prioritized. Before they understand their gift, they often see it as a curse, wishing they could turn off their sensitivity, wishing they could stop feeling so much, wishing they could be like everyone else who seems to float through life untouched by the emotional currents that constantly pull them under. This creates a question that deserves a deeper answer. Why does life seem harder for empaths? Why do so many of them feel as though they are constantly walking through emotional storms while others appear untouched by the wind and rain? Why do they attract people who need fixing, relationships that drain them, and situations that test the very limits of their endurance? And why do countless empaths only begin to understand their purpose after surviving some of the darkest chapters of their lives, after they have been stripped of their illusions, after they have lost everything they thought they needed, and after they have been forced to rebuild themselves from the ground up? In this video, we are going to explore the hidden journey many empaths experience, the path that is rarely discussed in mainstream conversations about success or happiness. You will learn why empathy is far more than simply being emotional or sensitive. You will discover how deep sensitivity affects the way empaths experience relationships, challenges, and personal growth in ways that most psychological frameworks fail to capture. We will uncover why empaths often attract difficult lessons, not because they are weak, but because they are capable of handling the depth that those lessons require. We will explore why emotional pain becomes one of their greatest teachers, why the wounds they carry become the source of their wisdom, and why the struggles they face may be preparing them for a purpose larger than they can currently imagine. We will also reveal a powerful truth that many people overlook, a truth that has the power to transform how an empath views their entire life story. The very experiences that once made an empath feel broken can eventually become the source of their greatest strength. The memories that once triggered shame can become badges of honor. The moments that once made them feel like victims can become the foundation of their empowerment. As this journey unfolds, each piece of the puzzle will begin to connect, creating a picture that is far more beautiful than the scattered fragments they once saw. And by the end of this video, you may see empathy, suffering, and purpose from an entirely different perspective, one that replaces hopelessness with understanding and replaces resentment with gratitude. Some of the most important insights are waiting near the end, where we will uncover why many empaths discover that the path they spent years resisting was actually leading them toward their purpose all along. So stay with us until the very end. If you have ever felt different, misunderstood, or burdened by the depth of your emotions, this message may explain more than you expect. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy content that explores human behavior, emotional intelligence, personal growth, and the hidden psychology behind life's biggest challenges, make sure to subscribe and join our community. Now, let us begin. For many empaths, the journey does not begin with understanding. It begins with confusion, a deep and pervasive bewilderment about why they feel things so intensely, while others seem to skate across the surface of life without ever breaking through the ice. Long before they learn the value of their sensitivity, they experience the weight of it, carrying it like a heavy coat that they cannot take off, even in the summer heat of social situations. As children, many empaths sense things that other people seem to miss completely, picking up on energies that adults dismiss as imagination and emotions that are never spoken aloud. They walk into a room and immediately feel tension, even when nobody says a word, their bodies reacting to the atmosphere before their minds can process what is happening. They notice changes in tone, facial expressions, and energy that others ignore, subtle shifts that reveal the true emotional state of the people around them. They can often tell when someone is hurt, angry, worried, or sad before that person admits it, sometimes even before that person is consciously aware of it themselves. At first, this may seem like a gift, a special ability to connect with others on a profound level. But without understanding what is happening, without the language to describe their experience, it often feels more like a burden, an unwanted intrusion into the private emotional spaces of everyone they encounter. A child who constantly absorbs emotions from the people around them may grow up believing there is something wrong with them, that they are too sensitive, too dramatic, too intense, or too broken to function normally. They may wonder why crowded places feel exhausting, why the noise and energy of a busy room leaves them feeling drained and irritable, while others seem energized by the same environment. They may question why they become overwhelmed by conflict while others move on easily, why a harsh word lingers in their mind for days while the person who spoke it has already forgotten. They may feel emotions so deeply that they struggle to separate their own feelings from the feelings of everyone around them, losing themselves in the emotional turbulence of their family, their friends, and their peers. This heightened sensitivity creates challenges that many people never see, battles that are fought silently behind a mask of normalcy. While others are focused on what is happening on the surface, empaths are often reacting to what is happening underneath, to the hidden frustrations, the silent disappointments, and the unspoken fears that lurk beneath every interaction. Because of this, they often become emotional caretakers at a very young age, stepping into roles that were never meant for children. They learn to monitor the moods of parents, friends, and family members, becoming hyper-vigilant to any sign of distress. They become experts at keeping the peace, diffusing tension before it escalates, and smoothing over conflicts that they did not create. They learn how to make others comfortable, how to say the right thing to calm an anxious parent, how to distract a sibling who is upset, how to be the stable presence in a chaotic household. They learn how to anticipate emotional needs before those needs are even expressed, developing an almost psychic ability to sense what others require. What begins as sensitivity slowly turns into responsibility, and over time, many empaths start carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. Burdens that would have crushed anyone else, but that they have learned to bear with a quiet, uncomplaining endurance. The difficult part is that most people do not understand this experience. Friends may tell them they are too sensitive, that they need to develop thicker skin, that they should not let things get to them so easily. Family members may encourage them to toughen up, to stop being so emotional, to stop taking everything so personally. Society often rewards emotional detachment while treating deep sensitivity as weakness, celebrating those who can remain cool and composed under pressure while dismissing those who feel the weight of the world as fragile or unstable. As a result, many empaths spend years hiding important parts of themselves, burying their true nature beneath layers of performance and pretense. They suppress their feelings, swallowing their tears and their anger and their grief until those emotions fester beneath the surface. They ignore their intuition, convincing themselves that the warnings they feel are just anxiety or overthinking. They pretend not to care as much as they actually do, masking their compassion with indifference to avoid being seen as vulnerable. But hiding sensitivity does not make it disappear. It does not dull the sharp edge of emotional perception. It simply creates a growing sense of isolation, a feeling of being fundamentally different from everyone else, of being an alien in a world that speaks a language they do not quite understand. They begin feeling different from everyone around them, disconnected from the shared experiences that bond others together. They wonder why life seems more intense for them than it does for others, why their emotional highs are higher and their lows are lower, why they feel so much while others seem to feel so little. They may even start believing that their empathy is the reason they struggle, that their sensitivity is a flaw that must be hidden at all costs. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings many empaths face, a distortion that can take years to untangle. The qualities that eventually become their greatest strengths often appear to be weaknesses in the beginning, like a seed that looks like nothing more than dirt before it sprouts. Their ability to understand others feels like emotional exhaustion. Their compassion feels like vulnerability. Their intuition feels like overthinking. Their sensitivity feels like a flaw that prevents them from living a normal life. Yet, what they do not realize is that these same qualities are quietly preparing them for lessons that will shape the rest of their lives. Lessons that cannot be learned in comfort. Lessons that require the very depth of feeling that they have been trying to suppress. As empaths move through adolescence and adulthood, another pattern often begins to appear. A pattern that reveals both the beauty and the danger of their empathy. Because they naturally focus on the emotions and needs of others, they develop a habit of seeing potential where others see problems. They look beyond mistakes, searching for the intention behind the action. They look beyond unhealthy behavior, trying to understand the pain that drives it. They look beyond emotional walls, peering through the cracks to see the wounded heart inside. When most people walk away from someone difficult, the empath often stays, not out of weakness, but out of a profound belief in the possibility of redemption. They notice the pain behind the behavior, recognizing the fear and hurt that drives aggression or withdrawal. They see the wounded child behind the angry adult, the fragile soul behind the tough exterior. They see possibilities that others overlook, imagining a future where healing has occurred and connection has been restored. This ability to recognize potential is beautiful, a gift that allows empaths to see the best in people, even when that best is hidden. But it can also become dangerous when it is not balanced with wisdom, when hope overrides reality, and when empathy becomes an excuse for tolerating harm. Many empaths develop a belief that love means understanding everyone, that true compassion means endless patience, and that kindness means always giving another chance, no matter how many times that chance is abused. Because of this, they often find themselves trapped in one-sided relationships, giving far more than they receive, investing emotional energy into people who have no intention of reciprocating. They give more than they receive, pouring their hearts into empty vessels. They listen more than they are heard, offering a compassionate ear to those who never ask how they are doing. They support more than they are supported, showing up for others in their darkest moments while facing their own struggles alone. Their generosity becomes automatic, a reflex that they cannot control. Their willingness to help becomes expected, a baseline assumption that others rely on without gratitude. Their desire to heal others becomes part of their identity, so central to their sense of self that they cannot imagine who they would be without it. Over time, this creates a painful cycle that is incredibly difficult to break. The empath continues giving because helping others feels natural, because it is the only way they know how to connect, because it gives them a sense of purpose and value. Yet, the people around them may become comfortable taking without giving back, accustomed to receiving support without offering it in return. Some individuals intentionally take advantage of this kindness, manipulating the empath's compassion for their own gain. Others do so without even realizing it, simply because the empath has made it so easy to receive without giving. Either way, the result is often the same. The empath slowly becomes drained, their emotional reserves depleted by the constant outflow of energy. They invest enormous emotional energy into relationships that offer very little in return, hoping that their efforts will eventually be recognized and reciprocated. They spend years trying to fix situations they did not create, taking responsibility for problems that belong to other people, and believing that if they just try hard enough, they can save the relationship, the person, or the situation. One of the reasons this happens is because boundaries do not always come naturally to empaths. Their focus on understanding others sometimes prevents them from protecting themselves, because understanding creates empathy, and empathy creates tolerance, and tolerance becomes permission. When someone behaves poorly, the empath often asks why, searching for the root cause of the behavior. When someone causes pain, the empath searches for the hidden reason behind the behavior, the trauma, the insecurity, or the fear that might explain it. While this ability to understand others is valuable, it can also lead them to tolerate situations they should leave behind, to accept behavior that should never be accepted, and to endure treatment that should never be endured. Compassion begins replacing self-protection, as the empath prioritizes the feelings of others over their own well-being. Understanding begins replacing accountability, as the empath's insight into someone's pain prevents them from holding that person responsible for their actions. People-pleasing often becomes another hidden challenge, a survival strategy that the empath developed long ago to avoid conflict and maintain connection. Many empaths fear disappointing others, fearing the rejection and abandonment that they believe will follow. They fear conflict, preferring to swallow their own feelings rather than risk an argument. They fear being misunderstood, so they over-explain, over-apologize, and overcompensate to ensure that everyone around them is comfortable. As a result, they say yes when they want to say no, agreeing to things that drain them and taking on responsibilities that exhaust them. They ignore their own needs to keep others happy, burying their desires and their boundaries beneath layers of self-sacrifice. They sacrifice their own peace to avoid upsetting someone else, prioritizing harmony over honesty. At first, this seems harmless, a small price to pay for connection. But over the years, the cost becomes enormous. Every ignored boundary creates resentment, a slow poison that builds over time. Every act of self-sacrifice creates exhaustion, depleting the empath's energy until they have nothing left to give. Every attempt to save someone else pulls them further away from themselves, eroding their sense of identity and leaving them feeling empty and lost. The painful lessons that follow are not punishments. They are teachers, harsh but necessary guides that lead the empath toward a deeper understanding of themselves. Life begins presenting situations that expose unhealthy patterns, placing the empath in circumstances where their old strategies no longer work. They encounter relationships that test their limits, pushing them to the edge of their endurance. They meet people who challenge their generosity, forcing them to confront the difference between giving and overgiving. They experience situations that force them to recognize the difference between helping and rescuing, between supporting and enabling, between loving and sacrificing. These experiences hurt, often deeply, but they also reveal important truths. They show the empath where compassion has become self-neglect, where their kindness to others has become cruelty to themselves. They show them where kindness has become self-sacrifice, where their generosity has been exploited rather than appreciated. They show them where love has become attachment to a hope rather than a reality, where they have been loving a potential version of someone who may never exist. Many empaths resist these lessons, clinging to the hope that things will change. They continue giving, pouring their energy into people who cannot receive it. They continue hoping, believing that one more chance will make the difference. They continue believing that if they just care enough, things will eventually change, that their love will finally be enough to transform the situation. But eventually, a moment arrives that changes everything. It may come after a betrayal they never expected, a sudden and shocking violation of trust that shatters their illusions. It may come after years of feeling unappreciated, a slow accumulation of disappointments that finally tips the scales. It may come after giving everything they have to someone who never truly valued it, a painful realization that their efforts were never going to be enough. Whatever form it takes, the result is often the same. They reach a breaking point, a threshold beyond which they can no longer continue as they have been. The breaking point is rarely dramatic from the outside, lacking the fireworks and confrontations that people expect. In fact, many people never see it happening. The empath continues smiling, going through the motions of their daily life. They continue helping, answering calls, and offering support. They continue functioning, showing up to work, fulfilling their responsibilities, and meeting the expectations of others. But internally, something begins to crack. The emotional weight becomes too heavy, crushing them under its immense pressure. The exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore, seeping into every aspect of their existence. The endless cycle of giving without receiving starts to feel unbearable, a relentless treadmill that they can no longer sustain. They realize they can no longer continue living the same way, that something fundamental must change if they are to survive. This stage often brings intense emotional burnout, a state of profound depletion that affects every part of their life. Burnout is more than simple tiredness. It is a deep emotional depletion that affects every part of life, draining the joy from activities that once brought happiness. Activities that once felt meaningful become draining. Even the things they used to love now feel like chores. Relationships that once felt rewarding become exhausting. Interactions with loved ones now feel like obligations. The empath feels disconnected from themselves, like a stranger inhabiting their own body. They may question their identity, unsure of who they are without the role of the helper. They may question their choices, wondering how they ended up in this place of exhaustion. They may even question the value of their empathy altogether, wondering if their sensitivity is a curse that has brought them nothing but pain. Betrayal often plays a significant role during this period, as the empath discovers that some of the people they trusted the most never valued them the way they hoped. This realization can be devastating, a wound that cuts to the very core of their being. Not because the empath expects perfection, but because they invest so much of themselves into the people they love, making their entire heart vulnerable to those they trust. When that trust is broken, the emotional impact runs deep, shaking the foundation of their self-worth and their faith in others. Disappointment follows, a heavy sadness that settles over them like a fog. The belief that kindness always leads to appreciation begins to collapse, revealing the hard truth that not everyone values what is given freely. The belief that understanding everyone will create healthy relationships begins to fade, as they realize that some people cannot be understood, changed, or saved. Yet within this collapse, a new awareness begins to emerge, like a flower pushing through the rubble. The empath starts noticing patterns they previously ignored, recognizing the red flags they dismissed. They begin recognizing how often they abandon their own needs, how they silence their own voice to keep the peace. They begin seeing how frequently they ignored warning signs, how they rationalized behavior that should have alarmed them. They begin understanding that constantly saving others did not create healthier relationships. In many cases, it simply delayed necessary change, postponing the inevitable moment when the truth would have to be faced. This awareness can be uncomfortable because it requires honesty, a brutal and unflinching look at their own role in the patterns that have caused them pain. It requires looking inward instead of focusing entirely on others, turning the spotlight of their empathy onto themselves. It requires acknowledging that empathy without boundaries can become self-destruction, that compassion without limits becomes a form of self-harm. For many empaths, this is the first time they truly begin examining themselves, not their partners, not their friends, not their families, themselves. It is a radical shift from their usual outward focus, a turning inward that feels unnatural at first. As these realizations deepen, suffering starts taking on a different role. It stops being an enemy and starts becoming a teacher, a stern but wise guide that reveals truths that comfort could never illuminate. Pain has a way of exposing truths that comfort often hides, stripping away the illusions and defenses that keep us stuck. During difficult periods, distractions lose their power. The noise of daily life fades into the background, and the empath is left alone with their thoughts. Surface-level concerns become less important. The things that once seemed urgent now appear trivial. The empath begins asking questions they may have avoided for years, questions that demand answers they have been too afraid to consider. Who am I beneath my role as a helper? What exists beyond the endless cycle of giving and rescuing? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns, attracting the same kinds of people, experiencing the same disappointments? Why am I drawn to certain types of relationships, even when I know they are unhealthy? What am I actually searching for, and will I ever find it? These questions mark the beginning of self-discovery, the start of a journey that will take them deeper into themselves than they have ever gone before. Instead of constantly directing attention outward, the empath begins turning inward, exploring the landscape of their own soul. They start exploring their own wounds, the old injuries that have never fully healed. They start examining old beliefs, the assumptions about themselves and the world that have shaped their decisions. They begin understanding how past experiences shaped their behavior, how the patterns of their childhood have echoed through their adult relationships. This process is not easy, not by any measure. It requires courage, the courage to look at the parts of themselves they have kept hidden. It requires patience, the patience to sit with discomfort rather than escape it. It requires a willingness to face uncomfortable truths, to acknowledge their own contributions to their suffering, and to take responsibility for their healing. As healing progresses, emotional maturity starts developing. The empath learns that compassion and boundaries can exist together, that they are not mutually exclusive. They learn that kindness does not require self-sacrifice, that they can be kind without setting themselves on fire to keep others warm. They learn that understanding someone does not mean accepting harmful behavior, that insight and accountability can coexist. They begin separating responsibility from empathy, understanding that they can care deeply without carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. This shift changes everything, transforming how they see themselves, how they relate to others, and how they navigate the world. The same sensitivity that once caused confusion now begins creating clarity, illuminating the path forward. The same intuition that once felt overwhelming starts providing guidance, a reliable compass that points them toward what is right for them. The same empathy that once attracted painful experiences begins helping them recognize healthier relationships, identifying the people who are capable of mutual connection. Slowly, they stop viewing their struggles as meaningless suffering, random afflictions that have no purpose. They start seeing them as experiences that shaped their growth, essential chapters in their story. And as these lessons continue unfolding, the empath begins discovering that every hardship carried a hidden message, a secret that could only be uncovered through experience. Every disappointment revealed a deeper truth about themselves or about the world. Every painful chapter was quietly preparing them for a version of themselves they had not yet met, a stronger, wiser, more authentic version that could only emerge through challenge. After years of carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to carry, many empaths arrive at a moment that changes everything. It does not always happen suddenly. Sometimes it develops slowly through a series of disappointments, each one adding a brick to the foundation of their transformation. Sometimes it arrives after one final betrayal, a last straw that breaks the camel's back and forces them to change. Sometimes it comes after years of exhaustion that can no longer be ignored, after their body and mind have finally had enough. Whatever the cause, a powerful shift begins to take place. The empath who once felt responsible for everyone else's happiness starts asking a different question, a question that had been buried for too long. What about my happiness? What about my peace? What about my needs? The empath who spent years fixing other people's problems begins wondering why they have ignored their own needs for so long, why they have neglected themselves while caring for everyone else. For the first time, their attention starts moving inward instead of outward, and the world begins to look different from this new perspective. This is often one of the most difficult transitions an empath will ever experience, a complete reorientation of their identity and their purpose. For years, helping others may have felt like their purpose, the reason they were put on this earth. Being needed may have felt like proof of their value, evidence that they mattered. Solving problems may have felt like love, the only way they knew how to connect. Sacrificing their own needs may have felt noble, a sign of their goodness and worth. But eventually, they begin to see a painful truth. Much of their identity was built around being useful to other people, around being the one who fixes, the one who listens, the one who supports. Their worth became connected to how much they could give, to the depth of their sacrifices. Their value became connected to how much they could endure, to their ability to withstand pain without complaint. Their importance became connected to how much they could rescue, to their success in saving others. The problem with this mindset is that it creates an endless cycle, a trap that keeps them perpetually exhausted. No matter how much they give, it never feels like enough. There is always one more person who needs them, one more crisis to manage, one more problem to solve. No matter how many people they help, there is always someone else who needs saving, someone else who demands their attention. No matter how hard they try, they cannot heal wounds that belong to other people, cannot fix what only others can fix. This realization becomes one of the most important lessons of their entire journey, the key that unlocks the door to their freedom. They begin understanding that they are not responsible for carrying everyone else's life, that they are not the savior of the world, and that it is not their job to rescue everyone who is struggling. At first, this awareness feels uncomfortable, like stepping into an unfamiliar room. Saying no feels selfish, a betrayal of their nature. Creating distance feels cruel, a violation of their compassionate instincts. Prioritizing themselves feels wrong, a reversal of everything they have been taught. Yet, the more they practice these changes, the more they realize something surprising. Healthy boundaries do not make them less compassionate. They make their compassion stronger. Instead of giving from exhaustion, they begin giving from strength, from a full cup rather than an empty one. Instead of helping because they fear rejection, they help because they genuinely choose to, because they want to, not because they have to. Instead of sacrificing themselves to earn love, they start recognizing that love should not require self-destruction, that true love does not demand endless sacrifice. This is where self-respect begins to grow, slowly at first, then with increasing strength. For many empaths, self-respect is not something they naturally learned early in life. They learned how to respect others, how to honor the feelings and needs of everyone around them. They learned how to understand others, how to see the world from their perspective. They learned how to support others, how to be a reliable presence in times of trouble. But learning how to respect themselves often takes much longer, because it requires unlearning the belief that their needs are less important than everyone else's. It requires recognizing their own needs as important, as worthy of attention and care. It requires acknowledging their own feelings as valid, as legitimate and deserving of expression. It requires understanding that protecting their peace is not selfish. It is necessary, essential for their survival and well-being. As self-respect grows, another transformation takes place. The need for validation begins to fade, loosening its grip on their psyche. Many empaths spend years seeking approval without even realizing it, looking to others to tell them they are good, that they are worthy, that they matter. They want to be seen as kind, to be recognized for their generosity. They want to be appreciated, to know that their efforts have made a difference. They want their efforts to matter, to leave a mark on the world. They want proof that their sacrifices were worthwhile, evidence that they did not suffer in vain. But external validation is fragile. It depends on other people, on their moods, their whims, their availability. It depends on circumstances they cannot control, on factors that are constantly shifting. Eventually, they discover that real confidence comes from somewhere deeper, from a place that cannot be shaken by the opinions of others. It comes from knowing who they are, regardless of who approves of them, from an unshakable sense of self that is not dependent on external affirmation. This newfound confidence changes the way they move through the world, transforming every interaction and every relationship. They stop chasing people who constantly pull away, recognizing that they deserve reciprocal effort. They stop trying to convince others to value them, understanding that those who do not see their worth are not worth their energy. They stop proving their worth through endless acts of service, realizing that their value is inherent, not earned. Instead, they begin showing up as their authentic selves, without pretense or apology. They stop shrinking to make others comfortable, refusing to dim their light to make others feel bright. They stop pretending to be less sensitive than they are, honoring their emotional depth. They stop hiding their intuition, trusting the inner knowing that has always guided them. They stop apologizing for caring deeply, recognizing that their capacity for love is a gift, not a flaw. Authenticity becomes one of the greatest sources of freedom they have ever experienced, a liberation from the exhausting performance of being someone they are not. For years, they may have worn masks to fit into different environments, adapting to the expectations of family, friends, partners, and society. They played the role of the strong one, the calm one, the stable one, even when they were crumbling inside. But the more authentic they become, the less energy they waste trying to be someone they are not. This creates a sense of peace that many empaths spend years searching for, a deep and abiding calm that cannot be disrupted by external circumstances. What makes this stage so important is that it marks the beginning of true purpose. Before this transformation, much of their energy was spent reacting to life, constantly solving problems, managing emotions, and putting out fires. But once boundaries, self-respect, and authenticity take root, their energy becomes available for something greater. They begin asking not what others need from them, but what they are meant to contribute to the world. They begin discovering passions that were hidden beneath years of emotional survival, talents and interests that were neglected because they were too busy serving others. They begin noticing talents they never had the chance to develop, gifts that were waiting to be expressed. Slowly, purpose starts taking shape, emerging from the ashes of their old life. And what is fascinating is that purpose rarely arrives in the form they expected. It is not always a career, not always a specific job or title. It is not always a dramatic calling that comes with a divine revelation. Sometimes purpose appears through meaningful connections, through the deep bonds they form with others. Sometimes it appears through teaching, healing, creating, guiding, or inspiring. Sometimes it appears through the simple act of living authentically, showing others what is possible by example. Sometimes it appears through being a safe space for others, a presence that allows people to heal just by being near them. The empath begins realizing that purpose is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming fully themselves, shedding the layers of conditioning and expectation to reveal the person they always were beneath. As this understanding deepens, they start looking back at their life from a completely different perspective, seeing their story through the lens of compassion rather than resentment. The experiences that once felt unfair begin revealing hidden value, like a treasure buried in a field of pain. The wounds they carried for so long start taking on new meaning, no longer just sources of pain, but sources of wisdom. They begin recognizing that every struggle taught them something important. Every challenge developed a quality they would not have gained otherwise. Every painful chapter developed qualities that cannot be learned from comfort alone. Qualities like resilience, patience, humility, and compassion. The empath who experienced rejection understands loneliness in a way few others can. They know what it feels like to stand on the outside looking in, to be left out and overlooked. They understand the pain of feeling unseen, of being invisible in a room full of people. Because of this, they often become the people who make others feel welcome, who notice the quiet one in the corner, who reach out to the person who is being ignored. They become the people who notice when someone is struggling, who see the pain behind the smile. They become the people who create spaces where others feel understood, who offer the acceptance that they themselves once craved. What once felt like a wound becomes a source of connection, a bridge that links them to the suffering of others in a way that transcends intellectual understanding. The empath who survived betrayal develops a unique understanding of trust. They know how devastating broken trust can be, how it shatters your sense of safety and security. They know how difficult it is to open your heart after being hurt, how every new connection carries the risk of old pain. They know the fear that follows disappointment, the anxiety that comes with hoping again. Because of this, they often become more thoughtful in the way they treat others, more careful with the hearts they hold. They understand the value of honesty, the importance of keeping their word. They understand the importance of integrity, of being the person they claim to be. Their pain teaches them lessons that shape the way they build relationships, making them more intentional, more present, and more aware. The empath who endured emotional hardship develops a deep understanding of healing. They know recovery is not linear, that progress is messy and unpredictable. They know growth is not a straight line, that setbacks are part of the journey. They know some wounds take years to fully heal, that deep scars require time and patience to fade. Because they have walked through darkness themselves, they become capable of guiding others through difficult seasons. Not because they have all the answers, but because they understand the journey, because they have traveled that road and know where the obstacles are. This is one of the most remarkable transformations an empath experiences, the alchemy that turns lead into gold. Their greatest wounds become their greatest tools, the very instruments they use to help others heal. The experiences that once made them feel broken become the very things that allow them to help others, giving them credibility, insight, and empathy. The pain they wished had never happened becomes a source of wisdom, a wellspring of understanding that they can draw from for the rest of their lives. The struggles they once resented become evidence of their strength, proof that they have survived and thrived against the odds. What makes this transformation powerful is that it creates genuine empathy rather than surface-level sympathy. They do not simply understand pain intellectually, as a concept or theory. They understand it personally, intimately, viscerally. They know what it feels like to lose hope, to feel like giving up, to wonder if things will ever get better. They know what it feels like to question themselves, to doubt their judgment, to wonder if they are the problem. They know what it feels like to rebuild after disappointment, to piece themselves back together after being shattered. This gives their words weight, their presence meaning, and their connection depth. It allows them to connect with people on a level that cannot be taught in a classroom, that cannot be learned from a book, that can only be earned through experience. As their understanding continues to deepen, another realization begins to emerge, a truth that changes everything they thought they knew about their journey. For most of their life, They believed purpose was waiting somewhere in the future, a distant destination they would eventually reach. They believed there would eventually be a moment when everything finally made sense, when all the pieces would fall into place. They imagined purpose as a destination, a place they would arrive at after enough growth, enough healing, or enough success. But slowly, they discover something far more profound. Purpose was never waiting at the end of the journey. It was being created throughout the journey itself, woven into the fabric of every experience, every challenge, every triumph. Every challenge was shaping them, molding them into the person they were meant to become. Every disappointment was teaching them, revealing lessons that could not be learned any other way. Every heartbreak was refining them, burning away the impurities in their character. Every setback was developing qualities they would eventually need, building the foundation for their future strength. The difficult path was not a delay, a detour, or a mistake. It was not evidence that they were moving in the wrong direction. It was the very process that was preparing them for who they were becoming, the only route that could lead them to where they needed to go. When they look back, patterns begin to appear, revealing the hidden logic of their journey. The lessons connect, each one building on the last. The experiences make sense, forming a coherent story that was invisible as it unfolded. The hardships that once seemed random reveal hidden purpose, a thread that ties everything together. They begin seeing how every chapter contributed to their growth, how the struggles of their 20s prepared them for the wisdom of their 30s, how the losses of their past created the capacity for greater love in their present. The moments that tested them developed resilience, the ability to bounce back from adversity. The moments that hurt them developed compassion, the capacity to understand the suffering of others. The moments that challenged them developed wisdom, the discernment to make better choices. Even the periods of uncertainty served a purpose, teaching them to trust the process even when they could not see the outcome. They taught patience, the ability to wait without giving up. They taught faith, the belief that things would work out even when there was no evidence. They taught perseverance, the determination to keep going even when everything felt hopeless. They taught the empath how to keep moving forward without having all the answers, how to take one step at a time even when the path was unclear. These lessons become part of their foundation, the bedrock upon which their new life is built. Without them, they would not be the same person, would not have the strength, wisdom, or compassion that now defines them. Many empaths spend years wishing they could erase certain experiences from their past, wanting to undo the pain and avoid the hurt. They wish they could avoid the heartbreak, the betrayal, the disappointment, and the grief. They wish they could skip the difficult chapters and arrive directly at the happy ending. But eventually they begin understanding that removing those experiences would also remove the growth that came from them. It would remove the strength they developed through hardship. It would remove the wisdom they earned through suffering. It would remove the deeper understanding that now guides their life, the insight that allows them to help others, the compassion that makes them who they are. The truth they eventually discover is both simple and powerful, a truth that has the power to transform their entire perspective. The fire was never there to destroy them. The fire was shaping them, burning away everything that was not truly them and refining what remained. Every challenge was developing qualities they could not have gained any other way, forging their character in the crucible of experience. Every difficult season was preparing them for a greater level of understanding, expanding their capacity for empathy and wisdom. Every painful lesson was helping transform empathy into wisdom, turning their sensitivity into a superpower rather than a curse. And it is within that transformation that the deepest parts of their purpose finally begin to reveal themselves, emerging from the shadows of their past to illuminate their future. Many empaths spend years wondering why life feels heavier for them, why they feel things so deeply, why they seem to carry emotional weight that other people never even notice. There are moments when they question themselves, doubting their path and their choices. Moments when they wish they could care less, feel less, and give less, wishing they could be like everyone else who seems to float through life without being dragged under by the currents of emotion. Moments when their sensitivity feels more like a burden than a gift, a heavy weight that they cannot set down. But as time passes, many of them begin to see a truth that was hidden beneath every challenge they faced, a truth that was waiting to be discovered all along. The pain was never there to destroy them. The pain was there to transform them, to strip away their illusions and reveal their true strength. Every heartbreak taught them something about love, about its depth and its limits. Every betrayal taught them something about trust, about who deserves it and who does not. Every disappointment taught them something about boundaries, about what they will and will not accept. Every loss taught them something about strength, about their capacity to endure and rebuild. And every difficult season pushed them closer to understanding who they truly are, beyond the roles they played and the masks they wore. Because purpose is rarely discovered during the easiest chapters of life. It is often revealed during the moments that test us the most, the moments that push us to our limits and force us to grow. The moments that force us to let go of what we thought we needed, to release our attachments and our expectations. The moments that force us to become someone stronger, wiser, and more aware than we were before, to evolve into a version of ourselves that we could not have imagined. What once looked like a curse becomes a gift, the very thing that makes you unique. What once looked like a setback becomes preparation, the foundation upon which your future is built. What once looked like suffering becomes the very thing that awakens purpose, the catalyst for your most profound transformation. That is why so many empaths eventually realized that their journey was never about avoiding pain. It was about learning how to turn pain into wisdom, how to transform wounds into strength, and how to convert compassion into a force that changes lives, including their own. The struggle was never meaningless. It was the crucible that forged their soul. So, if you are walking through a difficult season right now, do not underestimate what this chapter may be teaching you. The struggle you are facing today may be preparing you for a purpose you cannot yet see, a purpose that will only become clear when you look back from the other side. The answers may not be clear yet. The reason may not make sense yet. But your story is still being written, and the most powerful chapters are often the ones that are hardest to live through. Some of the most meaningful chapters often come after the hardest ones, after the darkest night has passed and the dawn begins to break. If this video resonated with you, take a moment to let us know by hitting the like button. Subscribe to the channel for more insights into empathy, psychology, personal growth, and human behavior. And share this video with someone who may need this message today. Someone who is fighting a silent battle and needs to hear that they are not alone. Because one simple share can reach a person who is silently fighting a battle nobody else can see. A person who is walking through their own fire and wondering if they will survive. And remember this, the strongest empaths are not the ones who avoided the fire. They are the ones who walked through it, who felt its heat and its pain, who were burned and scarred by it. They are the ones who survived it, who refused to let it consume them. They are the ones who learned from it, who let the fire teach them and transform them. They are the ones who discovered who they were becoming all along, emerging from the flames stronger, wiser, and more radiant than ever before. Because sometimes the reason you had to walk through hell was to become the person capable of bringing light to others, to become a beacon of hope for those who are still walking through their own darkness. You walked through the fire so that you could learn how to carry the light. And that light, born from your deepest struggle, is what makes you truly unstoppable.